I was sitting with my bandmates, and one came over the intercom, and it was one of my classmates asked me out on a date. And everybody stopped and were like, oh, because this has to be like maybe 5,000 people here, right? And it's over the intercom, and my mom was there because she was a band booster. And everybody turns and looks at me, and then he comes and sits next to me. And
what's going on, everybody? Thanks for joining us for another episode of the Black Student Success Podcast, where we bring you insight and guidance from successful Black professionals and students. My name is Selvin, and as always, we appreciate the support. So today we have Tiffany Atwater Lee. She is an archivist in the higher ed space. And so she's going to talk about what her career looks like, what it exactly means to be an archivist, and what's this whole sense of library science. So she's going to talk about her experience and what she's learned along the way. So Tiffany, welcome to the show. How you doing?
I'm good. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, thank you for joining. So we're going to start the show as we always do by asking, who is Tiffany Atwater Lee?
Okay, so Tiffany Atwater Lee is an archivist. I'm the assistant head of the Archives Research Center at the Atlanta University Center Robert W. Woodruff Library. So we are the library for the four institutions that comprise Atlanta University. So Spelman College, Morehouse College, Clark Atlanta University, and the Interdenominational Theological Center. And I'm a lover of history, a novice beer snob, and just trying to, work through this new space of motherhood as well.
Oh, okay. Well, congratulations on the new little one as well. So let's kind of talk about what motivated you to even get into the space. Was there anything, whether it was during your undergrad career or maybe even after that, which led you to get into your master's program? What led you to want to kind of be in this space and really develop in there?
So I've always loved history. Starting back in high school, taking your AP classes and history, I just loved it. So going into college, I knew I wanted to be a history major. And of course, you get all the pushback. What are you going to do with a history major? And I didn't know, but I knew that I really, really enjoyed learning history. I went to a mid-sized HBCU, South Carolina State University, and majored in history. And around my junior year, it starts to feels like the world's crashing in. What are you going to do? What are you going to do? And, they give you that little list of things you can do with a history degree. So it was like, did you want to teach? No, I didn't really like kids that much. I didn't really want to teach. They say lawyers. I'm like, no, I don't think I really want to be a lawyer. And archivist was honestly always the first thing on that list, alphabetically, but I never knew what an archivist was. And a chance encounter with the archivist at South Carolina State at the time, we had a class and we had a guest speaker, and I had never seen her. The campus was small enough that you kind of knew people like in the library and in registrar's office and things like that. So I had never seen her before. And at the end of class, I just was like, who are you and what do you do here? And she was like, I'm the archivist. And so she brought me upstairs to the attic area where the archives were kept, told me a little bit about what she did. And at that time, I was looking for filler classes. So I was like, I'm trying to do an independent study. Maybe I could do something like this. And she suggested volunteering first to see if I liked it. And I volunteered. And for the first day, I sorted photographs of South Carolina State for about 5 hours, and I fell in love. And so long story short, I then decided to do the independent study and got to know her and understand what archivists do. And when it was time to graduate, I said, this is what I want to do. And that's when I was informed that to be an archivist, I knew to be a librarian, you had to have a master's degree. I didn't know archivist and library science was so intertwined. So she really kind of helped me look for programs and things like that. So I found the Archival Studies program at Clayton State University. Applied. I was also able to volunteer at the place that I work at currently. I went to a conference and was introduced to my then supervisor, or my future supervisor. volunteered, graduated, started grad school, and started working at a public library. So I got a lot of reference experience dealing with the public. And then a paraprofessional position essentially came up at the institution I'm at now. That same person remembered me from meeting her years ago. And I was able to get into the archival space and have been there since and steadily grown with the onset of my degree completion and haven't looked back since.
Nice, nice. So, and there's 2 points that I want to definitely highlight from that story. So one was just the fact that you started the major just from the passion of, studying history. So regardless if you knew exactly what you wanted to do or not, you knew that you wanted to just kind of be in this space, even if you didn't, figure it out right at the beginning. And fortunately, you had that opportunity to figure it out, during that junior year. But a lot of students might go into college with just, I want to, study marine biology. I have no idea what I want to do with it, but just the idea of it is just super interesting. So I'm glad that you had that part of your story. And then secondly, the fact that you volunteered and that eventually led to, some of the positions that you're in now, just having the exposure to do so. And the fact that the archivist at the school was just, willing to have you in there and teach and, just kind of show you the ropes of what was going on. And a lot of the staff at colleges kind of have that mindset because, this is a space for students to grow and everything like that. And so that was really cool that she really took you under her wing and kind of showed you everything and, led to where you're at now.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's made all the difference.
Awesome. So now talk about a typical day, in what you do. Now, I know that you've had the experience from the volunteering where you were just simply sorting out photos to, being the department head, in the library system that you're at now. But what does a typical day look like for you or, that you can kind of give students an idea of, what it's like to be an archivist?
So I first want to kind of explain a little bit about what an archivist is and then kind of like how my role plays in that. So as archivists, we collect the personal papers and primary sources of organizations and people. There are many different types of archives. You can have corporate archives, like maybe the Coca-Cola archives, which is great. I'm happy to talk about like just my visit, like how it was so cool. You have your state and national archives. And then you can have academic archives, like what I work in. And so we keep all the records of the presidents, of student life. That's where you can go find your yearbooks and things like that. And so we organize those materials for researchers to be able then to use it and use it in documentaries, artwork, or just scholarship. So when you're seeing your textbooks and you're seeing the picture of the Declaration of Independence, an archivist was involved in getting that in there. So that's essentially what we do in a nutshell. We also teach with it. And teaching is teaching students how to use these primary sources, these documents, when you're doing your own schoolwork. So if you're doing an essay, how do you then connect what you've read in a secondary source in a book that you got in the library to something in person and tangible in front of you? And that's a lot of what I do. So I do a lot of the outward facing things. So that's using reference. So that's people wanting to come in and view and look at materials. I help them kind of parse through all the things that we have, what could possibly be helpful for them. We do exhibits. So everybody knows kind of like what exhibitions are, and then teaching the students. So I go into different classrooms and I teach students how to use these materials. So that's what I do. And within the AUC Woodruff Library, a typical day in an archive, I think a lot of people don't realize it, it can be anything. And so by anything, I mean, so you have your daily reference, right? People coming in wanting to utilize your stuff, but you also have instances where you get new collections. And so I think a press release has already gone out, but Morehouse College was gifted the Joseph Lowry and Evelyn Lowry papers. So Reverend Joseph Lowry was really big in SCLC. He was a previous president and really integral in the civil rights movement. And we have his papers. And so it was a grant that was given. And so we've been working to kind of find out what's in there, doing an inventory. And that's pretty much what we have been focused on for the past month and a half. So sometimes things can happen. Sometimes, unfortunately, if someone passes and we're trying to find information about that person, that can be an average day. But my favorite days, of course, are the days where I get to meet students and talk about archives in particular, and really get students to look at materials that we have. And what we do is called document analysis. So how do you look at an image and then decipher information from it without it telling you directly? And it's a skill that we do all the time, but we may not realize that we do it. And so when students kind of are awakened to visiting an archives and history can kind of be fun, that is my favorite part of the day. And so that's kind of what a typical day is. It's helping researchers, helping students, and actually getting collections in an organized way to be able to help those same researchers and students.
Yeah, awesome. So it sounds like the work is never done because there's always an opportunity for doing research, whether it is a professor or even a student or and I don't know if you had the opportunity to, have a filmmaker reach out to you for a documentary and needing some type of, resources to help put that together. But I'm sure being a part of that is also exciting. And then the last thing that you pointed out is making history fun. I can say personally that history was my least favorite subject in school. So to find a way to make it exciting, when it comes to just organizing. And for me, I like to organize. I like to get things in a certain order, for it to be used in whatever way that it is. So, if that was something that I was introduced to, for the fact that there is more to just, remembering dates and, the chronological order of certain events, that there is this whole side of it, of all this information. You probably have bookshelves of different information, and you're kind of protecting it, and then having it utilized to bring forth more research. So that's really cool. That's really cool that you have that the day is not the same all the time, and there's always new and exciting things and different people that you can interact with.
Definitely. And one of my favorites is really when we do get those. We've had HBO come in to do a documentary before. It was on, and I think it's actually, that documentary is available. We did not make the cut as far, but they did use our materials, source some of our materials, and it was on the Atlanta missing and murdered children's case. That was recently reopened. And so that was really interesting to be able to bring those materials out. And we had a scholar there who was really kind of helping to contextualize what we're seeing and in front of us. And so that's another part that I love. While things are never done, I'm always learning something new, even if it's the smallest detail that maybe I never even noticed before about history. It's kind of coming to life. I get paid to be nosy, literally going through people's stuff, and to also just kind of learn something different every day. And that for me is something that I heavily, heavily enjoy.
Awesome. Now let's talk about the skills that are needed to kind of be successful in this space. What types of things do you feel like you naturally brought to, being an archivist, and things that you had to pick up along the way? Can you talk a little bit about that skill set that you have now?
Yeah. So archives, like many professions, have had to do the shift because society has changed in some ways. So I'm going to talk a little bit about old ways archives were viewed, and those soft and hard skills we needed, as well as the shift of what's happening now. So originally, attention to detail, understanding of history to a certain extent, whatever history you're collecting. So we deal with African-American history and HBCUs and specifically, and I love that. So you have to be knowledgeable about, one, what is an HBCU, and two, how many are there, and things like that. You also have to be you have to understand the innate biases that you bring to it. We all have those biases naturally, and how they can appear and then affect the future. And what I mean by that is often archives before were filled of stories of old dead white men, right? But that's the only one part. You were missing women, you were missing Black people, you were missing LGBT communities, you were missing these other gaps. And that's what made people think that those histories didn't exist. And that's not the case. And so as an archivist, you have to be knowledgeable that there are gaps. Whose story is this? And whose voice is suppressed? And how do I get that voice so that I now have a clearer picture? So you have to kind of think like that a little bit, but be also honest with your own biases, because you don't want to essentially influence someone else, right? It used to be this idea that archives were neutral spaces, and that's not the case because nobody is neutral. Another skill that has shifted is that I don't know when's the last time you've written a letter, but I haven't written a letter in years, right? And so emails, social media, text messages, websites, that's all our new records. And so digital preservation and the preserving these records that have been born digitally from the start. They didn't start off on a notebook and someone typed them in, like they literally started on processing units. How are we now collecting that? And so digital archives, digital preservation is a huge skill. So going into my master's program, I knew that this was something, but I didn't realize I was going to have to learn HTML and CSS and Python and all these. I didn't, to me, it was like, I'm a history major. I'm not computer science, but you really do see where these two are merging together, which for those computer science majors who maybe wanted to do humanities, this might be a great intersection because this is where the world's going. Library of Congress is documenting the tweets of everyone, like Twitter. If you think about history, you cannot talk about the year 2020 or the last 4 years without Twitter. Like that, it was a big part of American history. And so how are we keeping those things? And so those are some of the hard skills that I had to learn is the digital space of how to crawl a website. So how to kind of set a program and have it look through all these websites and then capture images of it. So then that way I can go back and see what did this website look like in 2002. There's softwares like that that's doing that. So those are the type of skills that I was not prepared for that the world is going in. Also just automation. When you're thinking about cloud storage, where does the stuff go? Like, in archives, traditional, you have a physical space that once it's filled and you find another space. When you're thinking about digital information, that's endless, right? And so, but it still costs money and you still have to have servers and all of that. So that's another aspect that you have to be aware of is actually how does this stuff work from a technical standpoint, as well as like the financial implications. So I would also say innovation, because the world changes. Other histories are being told. You have to be able to innovate. How do I get people to understand archives? Archives often had this stigma of being the old dusty basement or attic that nobody's allowed to go to. And that's not the case. Archives are for everyone. That's a part of how archives came to be, was that this is information that belongs to the people. And so with that, how are we using social media? How are we using media in general to get people to understand these are your records just as much as they are the person who created them. And so being innovative in getting the word out and getting people to understand the history does not lie. Like well, it can, but but how do you get to these documents that really kind of can prove what your thesis is, what you're saying about the world in general, what has traditionally been said about this event, this topic, this person. So those would be the biggest skills, I would say. Definitely technology, innovation, and just honestly a brief knowledge. And I would also say passion to a certain extent. While everything is different and new a lot of times, some things are very mundane and very like, you're doing the same thing every day for maybe a month or 2 months. And so being able to kind of deal with that as well. And then lastly, I think and I didn't even think about this because I don't really deal with donors that much, being able to articulate and build relationships with people. So how do you get someone to feel that they can donate their materials to you? You'll take care of them. You'll get people to use them. And you'll also, make sure bad stuff doesn't get out about them. Like, how do you juggle all of that? And that is like, public relations, right? Like, how do you deal with all of that? And that's a skill set that I'm still learning. I'm like, if you want to talk about archives, I can talk all day, but like to chit chat to get you to open up so then I can talk about archives, that's a skill. And that's something that I would definitely say, I wish I would have worked on a little bit more when I was in school.
Yeah, it's a crazy skill set. There's a lot of things going on there. You talked about the communication. You talked about just the technical aspect of being able to keep the records, knowledge of history, passion. The technology part, the thing where you're talking about digital preservation, it's crazy to think that, even probably exists now, but definitely like years down the line, you'll have like a Twitter database and you can have all these tweets saved up and they're all linked to some type of history, and especially in your space, for those who are, attending HBCUs or prominent figures in African-American history, that there's, you can go through a bunch of tweets and then find something that's, geared towards history and use it in a paper. So I think that's pretty cool that you have the variety of the different aspects of the field. Like you said, it's not just this dusty basement of a whole bunch of old papers that are probably in plastics that kind of keep them preserved. It's spread out pretty wide as far as the different aspects. So that's actually really cool that you get to exercise all of those skills and you're in that space that's continuing to expand. What advice would you give to a Black student who is looking to kind of get into the space? So I think for you, you naturally had a bunch of African-American history surrounded by you as you were going to school, with going to an HBCU, being now, located in Atlanta. I think that's a huge part in that influence and what's, deemed important. But, regardless of where a student is at, location wise, what advice would you give to a Black student who's looking to get into the space?
Definitely say trying to get some volunteer and or internships. I'm not a huge fan of unpaid, but sometimes, that's where the world is right now. But if you do it while you're an undergrad, it may not hurt as much as when you've graduated and, you need money, essentially. Checking in with your local archive, maybe at your institution. A lot of students are a part of organizations, maybe even focusing on who's keeping our stuff, like who's keeping our stuff? Do you have a historian or an archivist position? And how do you keep that? There are a lot of webinars, institutes, and things like that, and scholarships available to attend those, specifically geared towards students and students of underrepresented populations, including people of color. I can speak from the Society of Georgia Archives, where I was the scholarship chair last year. We have about 7 scholarships that are open to students to either come to different workshops that we hold and or our annual meeting. And that is where you kind of learn about the profession. You can network, you can meet people, just to kind of get your feet wet and understanding kind of like, maybe is this the field I want to be in? And I would definitely say trying to make connections. You can always reach out to me. I'm happy to see if I can find anybody in your state. The archives profession, while it's very niche, it's also Atlanta, like you said, we do have, I think all of us got together one time and I think we had like maybe 26 Black archivists. That is not a representation of the entire profession anyway, but here, it feels like, oh, everybody looks like me. And that's great. And that can be very helpful when you are trying to either move to the next step or just kind of learn from each other. So definitely internships, reading about it, getting some practical experience in some way, whether it's, like I said, volunteering and seeing. So a lot of times with volunteers, you will have that mundane task. If you can get through that and be okay, that can kind of gear you up, because not all archives are as fun as mine. And I think some of that is also because, again, I have a passion about what we're actually collecting. I don't know if I was necessarily at a corporate archive, if I would necessarily feel that way all the time. So that's something to think about. I would also say just know that it is graduate level positions that you have to have a graduate degree in order to be an archivist, but there are some positions where you don't necessarily have to have that. There are also areas that you can go in and then kind of come back to archives. Like I said, computer science, law is something we have to deal with copyright often and legal issues. And so even if you're not sure if archives is what you want, but you know you really like law or something like that, you can kind of still merge these things together. And I think that's what I would give, the advice I would give is get your feet wet sooner rather than later. So then that way, if you're going to invest in a graduate program, you kind of understand exactly what you're getting into. And that also includes looking at the job market. Archives, because people don't necessarily always know what we do, a lot of times we're on the chopping block when it comes to budgeting. About maybe 5 years ago, the governor the Secretary of State of Georgia essentially tried to close down our state archive. And it went from a staff of like 80 to 100 people to like maybe 4. And, archivists band together to stop the closure, but that was something, and that's a government archive. So if you're in a corporate or something like that, times get rough, that's something that happens. So just being mindful of the job thread. However, again, that shouldn't deter you from going into the profession, but just being knowledgeable about that. And then knowledgeable about like a lot of professions, experience is what's going to get you into the door. So even if you have the degree, but you don't have any of that practical experience, that can still hinder you from that first job. So.
Gotcha. Yeah, that's a lot of great advice, and thanks for pointing out both the good and the not so good aspects of it, because that'll definitely give students an opportunity to assess the value of getting that degree, putting in the time before that, and all of that. So I appreciate all of that whole breakdown. Now, what is your definition of success? What things do you feel like? Once you've attained those things, you feel like you're successful. So whether that's money, whether that's something non-monetary, what is it for you?
So for me, first and foremost is feeling valued. And that can be both in my organization, but also in society. And so I think I definitely feel valued within my organization because archives are awesome, but that's me being biased. But feeling valued in society, and what I mean by that is when you get thanks by researchers in books that had to come to you to kind of offer something. It's like, wow, you saw me and you saw how I was able to help in what you needed. We get archivists and librarians often get thank you letters and stuff. So that's something that I feel valued. So knowing that, when I took that extra time to pull the box that's on the top shelf that I had to climb all the way up to get, it was worth it because it brought this new history to light. I would also say, for me, success is loving what I do. And I can honestly say, post-pandemic, pandemic make things a little weird, but pre-pandemic, I never was like, oh, I don't want to go to work. I always liked getting up and going to work because I never knew what I was going to get. I never knew who I was going to meet or what I was going to learn. And that's something that's everybody can't say that about their job. And then in between all of that, pay, because that's also how your organization can say or show that you are valued, is valuing your time and what you're worth. And I think that's something that used to be very bottom for me. I think I had this very naive idea sometimes about, if you work hard, pay will come. And that's not necessarily true. And so that's something that my 20-year-old self, if I could go back and tell her, like, no, you need to advocate for what you're worth. But I do feel that I am valued as it relates to pay. And so I think that those are the things that to me are successful, is feeling valued by my organization monetarily as well as socially, and feeling supported. I can always do workshops. I can always grow. That's something that's also very important to me and makes me feel successful when I can go to a conference and see, oh, I'm on the right track. I'm doing this. I can go to an institute to better myself and being a better archivist. And then, like I said, I wake up and I really enjoy what I do. I'm not dreading going to work more than, like, everybody would like to just sit on a beach. But as far as like that, to get up and go to work, this is the perfect job for me.
There you go. There you go. Very, very balanced definition. So thank you for that. Now, before we wrap up everything, just to get a few fun questions in. First, name one embarrassing thing that happened to you while you were in school.
Okay. So, so when I was in high school, I was in the marching band, and we would go to these competitions, and they would do, I forgot what they called them. They were like these grams. And basically over the intercom, people would say these things. And so they were almost like greeting cards. So somebody would like say, wishing, the Clover Street High School band much of luck, love all the band parents, things like that. Well, I was sitting with my bandmates, and one came over the intercom, and it was one of my classmates asked me out on a date. And everybody stopped and were like, oh, because this has to be like maybe 5,000 people here, right? And it's over the intercom, and my mom was there because she was a band booster. And everybody turns and looks at me, and then he comes and sits next to me. And it was just really awkward because I didn't like him in that way. And so I didn't give him an answer. And everybody was like just riding me like on the ride back, like, why you do that man like that? And I eventually told him the next day that, I like you as a friend, but not like that. And that was just embarrassing because I felt pressure to say yes, even though I didn't like him. But I was happy that I did not. I think he probably appreciates that too. But we stayed friends in high school. But yeah, that was embarrassing to me.
Yeah, I mean, shooting your shot in front of 5,000 kids, and there's a high risk situation here for both parties. So, hey, at least you guys got through it. So thank you for sharing that. And then finally, everybody has this one thing that, if people found out, then their Black card might get revoked, figuratively speaking. But what, if that was a real thing, what would be that one thing for you?
I cannot braid. I can plait, but I cannot braid. And that's hard for someone, for a little Black girl who cannot braid. And I'm just so thankful that God blessed me with a son. So I don't even have to worry about that right now. And that, I think that's what it is. I'm a Black girl who can't braid hair.
Okay. That's it happens. And there's YouTube. So I think, if a girl does come along the way, then you might be okay. So
I still literally will go to my mom.
Yeah. Nice. Thanks for being on the show. I want to give you an opportunity for any last words and just sharing any way that people can reach you in case they have any additional questions. I'm going to give you the floor.
Yeah, so you can always email me at tatwater@auctr.edu. If you have any questions about archives, maybe even our collections and what we have, you can always visit us at auctr.com. Is that that's our website. And go and see some of our digital collections if you want to see kind of the materials we have. We have the Morehouse College Martin Luther King Jr. materials, the voter education and organizational records. We have all the yearbooks from the AUC that are digitized, so you can look at write it from your home, and just kind of view and see kind of things that we collect. And again, I am here if you have any questions about the profession, how to get in, any questions about graduate programs. While archival studies is very niche, I want to say there's like maybe 4 programs in the US that have it. A lot of people go the library science route with a concentration in archives, but there's a lot of ways you can kind of get into archives. So even if a traditional library science route isn't what you want, maybe it's conservation, I'm happy to talk to you or link you with people who went that route themselves. And I just, again, thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. So we'll have all that information in the description. So again, Tiffany, thank you. And then thanks to everybody who's been watching and listening. Don't forget to follow us at Inquire Higher. That's on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Check out our website, inquirehigher.com. We've got a lot of great information there, as well as our newly opened online community where we are linking Black professionals and Black students to be able to share resources, make meaningful connections more directly. So definitely check out our website for more information on that. So until next time, peace.